Today, first I'll go through some solved examples based on what we have done so far on dipole antennas. And then we would move to the analysis of a short dipole. This problem that you are seeing in front of you has got a copper wire. We would assume that copper has infinite electrical conductivity. It's a 10-meter long wire. It's a thin wire, so it's a dipole antenna for sure. It is carrying 500 milliampere DC current. Calculate the total power radiated. Now, DC means zero frequency. That means lambda is infinitely large. So dl by lambda, the length, the physical length of the wire divided by lambda is 0. So it is definitely close enough to a Hertzian dipole. Okay. No matter what the length is at DC, all wires are close enough to Hertzian dipole. Now for DC, it is intuitive, but let's do it analytically, what the answer should be. For a Hertzian dipole, we have seen that whether you are dealing with near field or far field, the Poynting vector has only a radial component. We have proven it in the past. And here is the formula that I am reproducing from my previous notes. Eta naught beta square I square dl square sine square theta divided by 32 pi square r square. That is the value of the radial component of Poynting vector, whether in near field or in far field. Now, in our case, here lambda is infinitely large. So beta is 2 pi divided by lambda. That means beta is 0. So SR will be 0. No matter what else is happening, SR will be 0. In fact, we know that radiation occurs only when we have time varying charges or time varying current. In case of DC current, there is no time variation. So in any case, we expect the answer to be 0 in this particular case. But let's look at it more rigorously rather than going intuitively. So even if you use this formula for SR and put beta equal to 0, you get SR equal to 0. And S theta and S phi are 0 anyway. You may want to read the note on the left side. With DC current, no radiation would occur no matter how long or how short the wire is. As simple as that. So it is something that we knew in advance, but we decided to prove it mathematically. Once SR is 0, obviously WR, which you know as the formula given, I think some scanning has become a little wrong here. SR multiplied by 2 pi r square sine theta d theta. That d theta is missing on the right hand side, but you have this formula in the notes already. If you put SR equal to 0, the radiated power will be 0 for sure, no matter what the length is. And radiation resistance would also be 0. No matter how high the current is, the radiated power would be 0 because it's a DC current. In simple terms, a wire carrying DC current will produce no radiation. That's it. Okay. Now, problem 2. A 1 meter long dipole antenna is excited by a 1 megahertz current. Now we don't have a DC, so it will definitely produce radiation. A 1 megahertz current with an amplitude of 12 ampere. So peak current in the wire is 12 ampere. What is the average power density? That means the value of Poynting vector magnitude. radiated by this antenna at a distance of 5 kilometers in a direction that is 45 degree from the dipole axis. Now, one thing we always have to verify whether it's a Hertzian dipole or not. To do that, you calculate the lambda for 1 megahertz frequency. Okay. So I think it turns out to be 300 meters, and the physical length is 1 meter. So dl by lambda is extremely small. We can consider this dipole antenna to be a Hertzian dipole. Now the radiated power density is given by this equation, which was there in the previous example, and theta is given in this case as 45 degree. Dipole axis means z direction. That's what we assumed in the analysis. I is 12 ampere, and amplitude means peak value. So what you have to do is apply this formula carefully. The distance is also given as r equal to 5 kilometers. You got to change that into meters. Okay. Now another open question is whether we should use near field formula or far field formula. In any case, as far as SR is concerned, the formula doesn't change whether you are dealing with near field or far field. But if you were calculating E and H values, then it would have mattered whether you are looking at near field or far field. In this particular case, I think R upon lambda is also quite large. So we are definitely in the far field. Typically, if R is more than 2 or 3 lambda, you consider yourself to be far enough from the antenna. And here R upon lambda actually is 16.67. So we are definitely in the far field. So if they were asking you to calculate the E field and H field also, then you would be using far field formulas. If by mistake you were using near field formulas for E and H field, you would see that 1 upon R square and 1 upon R cube terms have hardly any contribution to the result. Anyway, that is immaterial in this case because they want only SR, for which the formula is the same, whether it's near field case or far field case. All these questions are important before you actually start calculating. Some sort of thinking is required before picking the correct equation. So now we have decided that this is the right equation to use. You plug in all the values. Theta is 45 degree. So sine theta will be 1 upon square root of 2. Sine square theta will be half. Eta naught is 120 pi ohm. We would assume air medium by default. Beta will be 2 pi divided by lambda, which can be calculated as 2 pi divided by 300 radian per meter. I is 12 ampere. DL is 1 meter. R is given as 5,000 meters. So we plug in all that. Double check my calculations once you get the document. Beta is 2 pi by lambda, beta square, DL square will be 2 pi DL by lambda square. I have calculated that. Eta naught is 120 pi ohm. Do calculations carefully, always. Don't jump too fast. I try to avoid calculator as much as possible. Initially, I try to simplify the result as much as I can without using the calculator. You will see that here. A lot of things cancel out. And the result is in watts per meter square. If the current is in ampere, okay, and 120 pi is in ohms. So the result will be watt per meter square. And all the distances and lengths are in meters. Then the result will be in watts per meter square. So this you can probably verify yourself. After plugging in all the values, the result turns out to be almost in nanowatt per meter square. Until the end, I have not used calculator. The result turns out to be 1.51 nanowatt per meter square at a distance of 5 kilometers from the antenna. This is approximate, but good enough. Okay. I'm just checking my calculations once. That's it. Hopefully there is no mistake. Get into the habit of writing MATLAB programs or programs in any language to do these calculations. In the exam, maybe it will not be useful, but in real life, small programs for doing these calculations are always helpful. Okay, next problem. For the antenna in problem 2, okay, we are going back to problem 2. Calculate the radiation resistance and the total radiated power. Okay, that's fine. We have the formula for radiation resistance. We know it's a Hertzian dipole, so we can use this formula, equation 1, straight away. Prad. In the exam, by the way, if it's a physical exam in the campus, then I normally give you a formula sheet, and I'll share that formula sheet with you in advance. If it is online exam, we'll see. Maybe I'll make it an open book exam or something. I don't want you to remember things and then make mistakes. So memory-based exams are not my way of conducting exams. Always make sure you are using the right equation if you are given the formula sheet. There will be a lot of formulas there that you may not need on that piece of paper. Picking the correct equation will be your judgment call. So for Hertzian dipole, this is the formula for RRAD. As we go towards other kind of dipoles, you'll see other formulas for radiation resistance. I'm giving you this upfront warning. RRAD does not mean the same formula all the time. It depends on the antenna. For Hertzian dipole, this is the formula. Yes. So we plug in the values. DL is 1 meter. Lambda is, I think, 300 meter, right? It was 300 meter, I think. Wait, 1 minute. Yeah, 300 meter. So RRAD has to be very small. I can see that. That is the biggest disadvantage of Hertzian dipole. It is hardly used in real life anyway. But Hertzian dipole analysis serves as the building block for other real life dipole antennas. So I plug in all the values. The result is 8.77 milliohm approximately. And total radiated power will be RRAD multiplied by I effective square. Now I effective will be 12 divided by square root of 2 amperes. So you plug in all those values, the total radiated power turns out to be approximately 0.63 watt. Okay. Next one, I'd like you to start looking at it. Think for a minute, then we'll discuss it. Center-fed Hertzian dipole antenna. Okay, they have told you it's Hertzian, so you should not be confused anymore. Center-fed Hertzian dipole antenna is excited, that means fed, by a current I naught equal to 20 ampere. I assume it's peak current. I was calling it I in my derivation, but in this problem, which I've taken from somewhere, they are calling it I naught. Fine. If the dipole is lambda divided by 50 in length, okay, so they are taking dipole as lambda divided by 50, and they are still calling it Hertzian dipole, which disagrees with what I told you. I would prefer to call it short dipole, but fine. I will go by their recommendation that it's Hertzian dipole, even though length is not that small. Fine. So determine the maximum radiated power density at a distance of 1 kilometer. Now, what is maximum value of SR? Look at the formula for SR once again. Obviously, SR will be maximum when theta is pi by 2. Okay. So you ignore sine square theta in this formula and do the rest of the calculation. That's what I have done here. Eta naught is 120 pi, beta is 2 pi divided by lambda, and I'm taking DL also inside the brackets. I naught square, 32 pi square, and R is 1 kilometer, so 1000 meter. Okay, so plug in all the values. What I got was 7.54 microwatt per meter square. Okay. Remember, when theta is 0, that means you are looking along the z-axis. There's no radiation. SR is 0 in that direction. Dipoles do not radiate along the length at all. This is actually true for all dipole antennas, not only Hertzian dipole. Okay, next one. Now, this is something which is more conceptual than calculation based. There is a concept called isotropic antenna. It is also known as omnidirectional antenna. It is supposed to radiate uniformly with all theta phi values. The value of SR is independent of theta and phi. This is a hypothetical antenna against which we compare real life antennas. It has infinitely small dimensions in all the three directions. I have written all this here. The isotropic antenna, also known as omnidirectional antenna, is one whose dimensions are infinitesimally small compared to the wavelength. This antenna radiates uniformly in all theta phi directions, but it has been shown analytically that e to the power minus j beta r divided by r type of r dependence would still be there. Whether in near field or far field, in both cases, you will see e to the power minus j beta r divided by r dot. In this case, in this particular case, there is no distinction between near field and far field. The formulas are the same. Okay. So, based on this observation that is well known, yeah, I've written it. There is no distinction between near field and far field. Okay. In case of isotropic antenna. So essentially speaking, ER, whether in near field or far field, can be written as some amplitude multiplied by e to the power minus j beta r divided by r. The value of amplitude ER naught will depend on how strongly or how weakly you are feeding the antenna. Okay. It's an arbitrary constant to be determined by feeding conditions. E theta in a similar manner is E theta naught multiplied by e to the power minus j beta r divided by r, where E theta naught is another arbitrary constant. E phi, again E phi naught multiplied by e to the power minus j beta r divided by r. In theory, all the 6 field components should be there. Let's see in reality what happens. For H also, 3 components are there. Each one has the associated amplitude, HR naught, H theta naught, and H phi naught. This is all given to you, by the way. Problem statement actually tells you that this is all given to you. The problem statement continues. Now, what is your job? Your job is to apply the far field Maxwell's, the four Maxwell's equations to equations 1 to 6. I took this problem from some American university question paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, these 6 equations are given to you. You apply the 4 Maxwell's equations to these 6 equations, and then you try to interpret what you see. That's your job. Because these 6 equations tell you that there are 6 arbitrary constants involved. Do Maxwell's equations help you in reducing the number of arbitrary constants? Normally they do. Let's see what happens. I've done only part of the solution. The remaining can be done by you. Let's start with Maxwell's equation number 1. Del cross E, we will assume e to the power j omega t type of time dependence. So del cross E equal to minus j omega mu naught h. We are assuming air medium by default. Second equation is del cross h equal to j omega epsilon naught E. Third one is del dot E equal to 0. Fourth one is del dot h equal to 0. You know these 4 equations. Now pick equation number 1. Del cross E in spherical coordinate system, as you know, will have 3 components whose values are known to you. The formulas for the values are given to you. I've given these formulas to you several times. So if I take R component of del cross E, it is given by equation 5. Now you plug in the values of E phi and E theta that are given to you. E phi has only R dependence and E theta also has only R dependence. So on the right hand side of equation 5, within the brackets, d by d theta term will go to 0 and d by d phi term would also go to 0 because E theta and E phi have only R dependence. They don't have theta and phi dependence. That is what omnidirectional antenna is supposed to be all about. So del cross E's R component is 0 in this case. Del cross E's theta component actually has d by dr term, so it cannot be 0. But the first term, der by d phi term, that goes to 0 for sure. In the second term, you put the value of E phi given to you. This one, E phi naught e to the power minus j beta r divided by r. So r E phi will become E phi naught e to the power minus j beta r. I hope I have not made a mistake in doing differentiation. What I get is j beta divided by r E phi naught e to the power minus j beta r. And del cross E's phi term also has d by dr term, so it will also not go to 0. You can plug in the values for ER and E theta that are given to you in the problem. Double check my derivations. The phi component of del cross E also turns out to be non-zero. So if I take these 3 results, equation 6, equation 8 and equation 10, and plug them on the left hand side of Maxwell's equation 1, and on the right hand side I have got 3 components of H field multiplied by j omega minus j omega mu naught. I start comparing the coefficients of each of the unit vectors on both sides. Try doing it in detail, but HR obviously will be minus 1 upon j omega mu naught del cross E's R component, and del cross E's R component is 0. So HR will be 0. Okay. That's very interesting result, that for isotropic antenna, there is no HR. H theta can be derived also. And what we find when we compare left-hand side and right-hand side in terms of coefficients of unit vector in the theta direction, you find that you can double check this in detail later, but you find that H theta naught and E phi naught actually are not independent. They are related to each other. This is something new that comes out. So Maxwell's equations are giving you something new. H theta naught and E phi naught are directly proportional to each other. H theta naught and E phi naught, they are related to each other. And the ratio of these two components, you can see it very easily, turns out to be minus eta naught. Eta naught is 120 pi ohm. So this eta naught is present almost everywhere where you see some E field divided by some H field in the air medium. Of course, appropriate components. E phi naught will be related to H theta naught, and I think E theta naught will be related to H phi naught. We'll see that also. Once you compare the phi terms and simplify, yes, you get that E theta naught and H phi naught are also not independent of each other. So what is happening is you have gotten rid of arbitrary constants involved in the H field. You are left only with arbitrary constants in the E field. And in fact, if HR is 0, I think ER would also be 0. I have not proven it, but if once you start applying Maxwell's equations 2 and 3 and 4, you may prove that the only additional information that will come out will be that ER would also be 0. That's it. So what I'm telling you is the ultimate result in case of an isotropic antenna, whether in near field or far field, you get E theta, E phi, H theta, and H phi. And E theta upon H phi and E phi upon H theta have eta naught with plus or minus sign. This is how isotropic antenna behaves. So please apply the other Maxwell's equations to the given field formulas. Hopefully nothing new will come out except ER equal to 0. So I'll leave this with you to complete. And it is easy to figure out, although I have not done it here, but it is easy to figure out the Poynting vector also in this case. You try to do it yourself. How much would be the radiated power density of an isotropic dipole antenna? So sorry, isotropic antenna. It's not a dipole antenna. It is actually an isotropic antenna. I'm sorry, I've moved too far behind. This is the problem we are looking at. So please also do SR calculation in this case and see what you get. And maybe try to calculate radiation resistance of an isotropic antenna also, although I have not done it here. Okay. Now, I would, last time I told you that as length of the antenna, length of the dipole antenna starts increasing, there comes a point where the constant current assumption along the length of the antenna is no more valid. And then we enter the territory called short dipole antenna. Short means the length is neither too small nor too large compared to wavelength. How do you analyze this antenna? based on what you have done for Hertzian dipole. That is what I'm going to do in the rest of today's lecture. We would assume a symmetric case where upper arm and lower arm are of the same length, and the center of the antenna is at z equal to 0. That means z equal to small h is the upper end of the antenna, and z equal to minus h is the lower end. And for analysis purposes, we would ignore the effect of the feed. We would assume that field dimension has no effect on the analytical results. As long as L by lambda is above some value and below some value, we'll call it a short dipole. That some value is a number that I've given you in the previous lecture, but different people use different guidelines of in terms of how to define a short dipole antenna. We saw in one of the solved problems that even when the length was lambda divided by 50, they were calling it a Hertzian dipole. I prefer that if length is more than lambda by 100, then we should start calling it short dipole. But again, these are individual calls, no issue. Now, anyway, assuming that it's a short dipole, that means not too long and not too short in length. Let's see, how do you handle the analysis? One thing is clear, that current along the length of the antenna can no more be assumed to be constant with Z. The recommended assumption is that you assume linear current distribution. This is based on experiments as well as theoretical analysis. Yeah, roughly, if length is less than lambda by 100, we call it a Hertzian dipole. Although exceptions are there, depending on which book you are reading. So the moment the length is above lambda by 100, or some other value that you agree to use, we start calling it a short dipole. As a rough guideline, it's less than lambda by 4, but more than lambda by 100. This is my definition. If the length is too large, then also you don't call it a short dipole. Then it becomes arbitrary length dipole. We'll be talking about that also soon. Antenna is being fed at its center, that the center is at z equal to 0, and that the length is aligned along the z-axis. These are all assumptions made to begin with. Remember, for Hertzian dipole, we saw that if the antenna was lined up along z-axis, then A also had only z component. That would apply to short dipole also, as long as it is directed towards z-axis. The formula for Az in case of a Hertzian dipole was equation 4 here, because the line integral simply gave us IDL. And by the way, e to the power j omega t is understood to be present on the right hand side of Az, and even for all the field components. And we have seen also all these equations for Hertzian dipole. I'm repeating them so that you can easily refer to them in this document. These are near field formulas that we have derived for Hurrian dipole. We want to reutilize them for short dipole. Let's see how we do it. We will not do the entire derivation again for short dipole. Yeah, these are the various parameters. You know this already. I have written it for the sake of completeness. Just 1 minute. Now, the real thing, anyway, these are things well known to you, so I'm not going to go through them. You know all this. So. You know, what happens in case of a short dipole? Where is the departure? It is not realistic in that case to assume that the current is constant with Z. That's for sure. The recommendation is that you assume linear variation of current with Z, but different equation to be used in the top half and another equation, one equation to be used in the top half and another equation to be used in the bottom half. Same equation will not be able to describe both the currents. And the formula for AZ in case of a short dipole becomes this. IDL has been replaced by integral of IZ with dz from Z equal to minus H to plus H. You can compare the formula for AZ in case of a Hurrian dipole. I take IDL out and put the integral of IZ dz from minus H to plus H. That's how I write AZ for a short dipole engine. Okay. It is obvious if you go through the basics. Now, how do you calculate this integral? For that, you need to make assumptions about the behavior of IZ. And based on experimental studies and also theoretical analysis, in case of a short dipole, we can assume that IZ with Z is a linear variation. I have said it several times. Okay, let's move forward. The effect of opening in the center of the antenna needed for feeding the antenna is assumed to be small enough so that it is negligible. The assumed current distributions are depicted below. On the top half, I have a current beginning at 0 at the top and coming to maximum at Z equal to 0. Same thing happens in the bottom half also, but here the equation will turn out to be different. Let's see how we do that. In the top half, let me say that current is written as A plus BZ, where A and B are two unknowns. I know that at Z equal to plus H, current is 0 because that is the end of the wire. That's one condition. And at Z equal to 0, current is maximum. Let's call it IM. So if I put small z equal to H and IZ equal to 0, I get equation 80. And at the center, if I put Z equal to 0, I will get IM equal to A. Yeah. So A is equal to IM, and I can use this equation to figure out B. Equation 18. 18 and 19, if you solve for A and B, you get the value of IZ in the upper half. Okay, B turns out to be minus Im divided by H. So the formula for Iz in the top half of the antenna is equation 21. Now for the lower half also, you do the same thing. Assume the general formula A plus Bz, but now at Z equal to minus H, you'll get 0. And at Z equal to 0, you'll get Im as before. So you substitute all that. The equation in the lower half turns out to be equation 22. Equation in the upper half turns out to be equation 21. Maybe I could have used I1 and I2 instead of saying I in both cases, but I'm definitely mentioning the ranges, so you should not be confused. For the upper half, Z is between 0 and H. For the lower half, Z is between minus H and 0. Now I plug these two formulas back in the formula for Az. Here, the line integral will now break into two integrals. One will be between minus H and 0, and the second one will be between 0 and plus H. And you will use the appropriate equation for Iz in both cases. So doing all that leads to, yeah, here I have done it actually. For the upper half, I am using Im multiplied by 1 minus Z upon H for Iz. For the lower half, I am using Im multiplied by 1 plus Z upon H as Iz. You can maybe do, and the rest of the term is constant anyway. I mean, it can be taken out of the integral. We are still assuming that antenna is not very long, so capital R and small r are the same approximately. Now you do these integrals, the definite integrals, carefully. Wait a minute. Oh yeah, this is what I'm doing. 1 minus Z upon H. Im has been taken out, so 1 is 0 to H dz, Z by H is 0 to H dz. Yeah, fine. You can verify these derivations yourself. This simplifies to Az equal to mu naught Im H e to the power minus j beta r divided by 4 pi r. The formula for Az after simplifying turns out to be equation 24. And H is L by 2. So another way of writing it could be equation 26. Now compare this Az with Az for Hertzian dipole. I know it's very difficult to do by going back and forth. On a blackboard, it would have been a lot more easy to see the two together, but fine, let me try my best. One rate. Okay. Actually, I thought I had that formula somewhere. But anyway, if you see the formula for Az for a Hertzian dipole, you will see everything the same as we got it in case of a short dipole, except some change in the coefficient. This Az formula, this one here, is exactly the same that you got for Hertzian dipole, except the fact that in that there you got ideal. And here actually you are getting IMH with one more correction, I think. Compare the two. Yeah. If you take the formula for Hertzian dipoles AZ and replace IDL by IML by 2 or IMH if you want, you get the AZ for short dipole. You can check it yourself. Compare this AZ formula, equation 26, with the AZ formula for Hertzian dipole. The only difference is that IDL has been replaced by IML by 2. Everything else is identical. So, from this point on, you don't have to do any derivations because we have done the derivations already for Hertzian dipole. Okay. There we figured out, based on A, we figured out H, and from there I went to one Maxwell equation to figure out E values. All that can be done here, but it's easy to intuitively predict what would be the results. And we are talking near field right now. Okay. The derivation of near field components of a short dipole antenna can now be done along lines used for deriving the near field components of the Hertzian dipole antenna. In fact, the desired mathematical expressions for ER, E theta, E phi, HR, H theta, and H phi of a short dipole antenna can simply be obtained by replacing IDL by IML by 2. Equations 5 to 10 these equations. Simply remove IDL and put IML by 2. That's it. You got the formulas for short dipole. Book doesn't do it in detail, but they give you the basic philosophy for sure. So if I do that simple substitution, there's no need to do detailed derivation in that case. I get the final formulas for the near field in case of a short dipole as these. HR equal to 0 because it was true for Hertzian dipole also. So it would be true here also, right? H theta is 0 again as it was for Hertzian dipole. H phi will have 1 upon r term as well as 1 upon r square term, and IDL has become IML by 2. So 8 is there in the denominator. For Hertzian dipole, there was 4 in the denominator. And similarly, ER formula will actually have 1 upon r square and 1 upon r cube term as it was for Hertzian dipole, and E theta also will have 1 upon r term, 1 upon r square term, and 1 upon r cube term, and E phi will be 0. Now for far field, obviously ER would go to 0 because there is no 1 upon r component there. Note that there is a 1 upon r component outside the bracket. You take that in. So you will see only 1 upon r square and 1 upon r cube terms in ER. So for far field, H phi and E theta would be the only ones surviving. And again, it's very easy to see that even for a short dipole, E theta and H phi are related to each other by a factor eta naught. Radiated power, you can verify it yourself. I have not done detailed derivations, but it is easy to figure out that radiation resistance for a short dipole is now to be given by equation 40. 80 has been replaced by 20 compared to Hertzian dipole. Obviously, because a factor of 2 is there and that gets squared. So R rad for a short dipole antenna is given by 20 pi square L by lambda square. Try to verify it yourself. Now, another antenna which is equally popular is monopole antenna. What we do here is take the dipole antenna, remove the bottom half completely, and put a metallic plane in which the top half is dug in and soldered. So there's no bottom half, and you have a perfectly conducting plane physically supporting the top half. In fact, in reality, we use earth for monopoles. Earth is not a perfect conductor, but we take that chance. Or what we do is we dig in the antenna and put a solid conducting material around the antenna before we dig it in the earth. So that ensures at least good conductivity around the antenna. Monopole antennas are better suited to installation in real life. They give a lot more mechanical stability compared to dipole antennas because one end is solidly dug into earth. That's why they became popular. And in theory, what will happen is if you remove the bottom half, the electromagnetic analysis will not change much. There's a theory called, I think they call it principle of images. That theory tells you that if there's a conducting plane and only top half, you can remove the conducting plane and mirror image the top half in the bottom half. So you again get a short dipole antenna for analytical purposes. So the field components derived even for a monopole will be the same, except the fact that now theta range will be from only 0 to pi by 2 in case of a monopole. There's no bottom half, Let me show you. I think I've drawn it somewhere. Big document. Monopole. Yeah, here. Good. I have this diagram. The field components are given by exactly the same equation that were true for a dipole antenna, for a short dipole antenna. But only top half will be radiating. So theta will be from 0 to pi by 2. Radiation resistance will become half of what we got for the corresponding dipole. Because now radiated power will be only half of what a corresponding dipole would have given. The integral will be only between theta equal to 0 and pi by 2. So it is easy to see that R rad will be even smaller. Monopoles are easier to mount in some practical applications. That's true for sure. Let me see. See what did this say. This probably has nothing new. Yeah, it's the same thing, but done slightly differently. I'm using I1 and I2 symbols for top half and bottom half currents. That's it. But by and large, everything is the same here. And I'm using A, B constants for the top half and CD for the bottom half. So some people find this more understandable compared to the previous document, but the topic is, I think, the same. I'll send you both. You take your pick, which one you want to read. Yeah. AZ. For Hurrian dipole, it contains IDL. For short dipole, it starts seeing IM L by 2 instead of IL, instead of IDL. That's it. That means, yeah, all these formulas are given in the previous document also. This is another way of drawing the monopole where current distribution is also shown as a linear one. But there's nothing new in this document compared to the previous document. Only thing is things are written slightly differently. Now, actually, the real challenge begins after this. Most of the practical dipole antennas are not even short dipoles. They are, in general, quite long compared to wavelength. How do you handle that? The current along the length of the antenna will neither be constant, and you cannot even make it linear. That would also be highly inaccurate if the length of the dipole antenna is very large. Lot of analysis has been done for such cases. This is the symbolic description. I would again assume that top half and bottom half have identical lengths. And I am going to be using capital H symbol now for the top half length and bottom half length. This is what book does to distinguish this length from the length of the short dipole. We are using capital H here. And also for the length, we are using capital L, not small l, so that we don't mix symbols. The feed would be assumed to be at Z equal to 0. That means it is center fed dipole. The dimensions of the feed will be assumed to be small enough so that they don't disturb our analysis. One problem that will occur now is that capital R and small r will not be the same. Capital R is the distance between point of observation and the source of radiation, while small r is the distance between point of observation and the origin. So far, the length of the antenna was small enough, and we assumed that capital R and small r were almost equal to each other. That unfortunately cannot continue to apply in a case like this, where length is large enough compared to lambda. So that will complicate our analysis even more. And what do you assume for current now? An approximate recommendation is to use sinusoidal functions. They come close enough to reality. This is based on transmission line theory for a wire which is being fed at the center. I'm not proving it. I'll take the recommendation as given. Yeah, all these assumptions are the same as we saw for a short dipole. Now, the biggest difference will be due to the fact that currents are no more linear or constant. They are actually functions of Z. And these are the recommended current distributions in the book, in most of the books actually. They are not 100% correct, but they are close enough to what you see experimentally on such antennas. For the top half, the equation to use is Iz equal to Im sine beta h minus z. For the bottom half, the equation to use is Im sine beta h plus z. And peak value also occurs not exactly at z equal to 0, but somewhere else. Capital H is, of course, equal to capital L by 2. That's not the issue at all. So let me read this carefully. Let us assume that dz represents an elemental length of the antenna at a distance z. At a distance z from origin, we take a small length of the antenna called dz. Okay. And then these are the assumed current distributions. Figure 3 shows the various geometrical parameters involved, assuming that the point of observation is sufficient. Oh, by the way, in this case, near field analysis is very difficult. We would only do far field analysis. That can be handled reasonably easily without losing much accuracy. Near field calculations in such a case are extremely complicated. You need to write detailed programs based on numerical calculations. Numerical techniques are necessary. So we will assume far field by default. Okay. I'll come to the diagram in a minute. So we assume that we are in the far field all the time so that the lines from all points on the antenna length to the point of observation are parallel enough to each other. This is what we are assuming. Point of observation is very far away. So that whether you are drawing a line from O, from the origin to P, or whether you are drawing a line from some other point along the antenna length to P, they have virtually the same angle theta with z axis. That is the assumption. However, even if you make that assumption, you see that capital R and small r are not the same. Capital R is the distance between some point located z away from origin on the length of the antenna to the point of observation P. Small r is the distance between origin and P. If you look carefully, assuming that these two lines are parallel, if you look carefully, you will see that capital R is shorter compared to small r by a factor, this, z cos theta, approximately. Small r minus z cos theta gives you capital R, assuming we are in the far field, sufficiently far away, so that these two lines are parallel. Okay, see, our job is to move forward again. So we are trying to make simplifying assumptions so that we can do some analysis. Otherwise, we'll end up having mathematical expressions, complicated ones, staring at us, begging for a solution, and we'll have no way out. Simplifying assumptions are necessary without losing too much accuracy, hopefully, so that we can move forward. That's what I'm trying to do right now. One assumption is these current distributions. The other assumption is parallel lines from all points of the antenna length to the point of observation. And based on that, this equation 1. Of course, A would again have only z component. That fact doesn't change. Even if the length is arbitrarily large, A would still have only z component because antenna is still lined up along the z axis. The formula for AZ, however, now changes to this. Lot of things go inside the integral. IZ has to be within the integral. Oh, again, dz is there, but in the scanning, I think z has been missed. The integral is with respect to small z. Now e to the power minus j beta capital R has to be used, not small r. Because in real formula for AZ, there was capital R, not small r. In the previous two cases, for short dipole or Hurrian dipole, we assumed capital R equal to small r. And we took that factor out of the integral. But now we will not be able to do that. You have to bring that factor inside the integral. And along with that, you use equation 1. It's a scary thought that we have to do all this, but we have no choice. And again, in the bottom half, the equation for IZ is different. In the top half, it is different. Both are given here. So integral has to be broken up into two parts. And appropriate correction for capital R in terms of small r also has to be brought in. That would bring Z in e to the power minus j beta r term also. Integrals are going to be very complicated in this case. So this is what we get. Integral breaks into two different integrals. Hopefully I have not made a mistake in plugging in. See, instead of capital R, I am putting small r minus z cos theta everywhere. For Iz, I am putting, by the way, Im can be taken out. That's not the issue. Between 0 and capital H, I am putting sine beta h minus z. Between minus h and 0, I am putting sine beta h plus z. And in the denominator also, in the integrand, I mean, the denominator also has capital R. So you'll have formula for Az. Impossible to solve, analytically at least. Despite all the assumptions, we are still looking at a very, very scary situation. How do you integrate this? No way. No way. There's Z in the denominator, there is Z in the numerator, in the phase term as well as in the amplitude term. This is a nightmare. The way out. Again, it's the way out again. Copping out, you know. Engineers always love copping out without losing too much accuracy. What we do here is a thought experiment. We know that small r is quite large. The length of the antenna, no matter how long it is, will not be like kilometers for sure. It will always be, say, 10 meter, 5 meter, maybe 20 meter, maybe 100 meter at the most, not more than that. While as small r, the point of observation will be in kilometers and kilometers. So, if I say that, let me just take a chance without making anybody angry. If I take a chance saying small r is large enough and I can ignore z cos theta compared to it, a lot of people will shout, how can you do that? The phase information will be lost. E to the power minus j beta r minus z cos theta has important phase component. You cannot do that there. Okay, we will not do it there. How about if we are allowed to do that in the denominators at least? In the denominator, if I ignore z cos theta throughout, and I leave z cos theta in the numerator unchanged, because I know I'll be losing a lot of important phase related info if I do that. So I'll take an assumption that only in the denominator z cos theta is negligible in both the integrands. So at least 1 upon r comes out from the denominators of both integrands if I do that. I have written it here actually. R minus z cos theta is approximately equal to r, but only in the denominators, not in the numerators. In the numerators of the two integrands, we continue to maintain the entire phase term so that phase information is not lost due to over approximating. You approximate only where it does not affect your accuracy too much. So you will not be allowed to make that assumption in the phase term, but in the amplitude term, maybe you can. This is the crux here. So, okay, if I do that, then integrands become little more easy to handle, or other integrals become little more to handle. 1 upon r goes out of the bracket. What I get is one integral involving e to the power minus j beta r minus z cos theta sine beta h minus z, and the other integral involving e to the power minus j beta r sine beta h plus z may be doable, let's say. This probably is doable. How? You know that sine theta can be expressed in terms of e to the power j theta and e to the power minus j theta, right? Sine theta equal to, I think, e to the power j theta minus e to the power minus j theta divided by 2j, I believe. You can double check that. If I take advantage of that, I'll get exponential terms in both the integrands, which are easier to integrate. Okay, I am doing one integral at a time. Integral 1 is the first one. Let's tackle that first. Okay, before I do that, what I have done is something else. In integral 2, yeah, that's probably a better approach. In integral 2, which is the second integral within the brackets, if I choose a dummy variable z prime equal to minus z, then dz prime will become minus dz. So integral 2 then modifies to this. Hopefully you can see the point. By choosing a dummy variable in integral 2 as z prime equal to minus z, I convert equation 10 to equation whatever number this is. There is no number actually for this. Yeah. And once I have done that, I can, dummy variables, how they're useful. Once you have done that, you can revert back to calling them z. So integral 2 essentially becomes equation 12 by making this substitution. E to the power minus j beta z cos theta sine beta h minus z dz. And integral 1 is e to the power plus j beta z cos theta sine beta. Okay. Integral 1 and integral 2 both have integrands now, which I have got sine beta h minus z. Yes. So if you sum up the two integrands or sum up the two integrals, of course you cannot, because the limits are also different. In integral 2, the limit is different. No, actually it has become 0 to plus h. Yeah, okay, now it's coming back. Yeah, we have in the process also been able to make the limits same in both the integrals by doing this substitution. This is actually something that's not very well explained in the book. I think I ended up doing it myself. So integral 1 plus integral 2 then simply becomes 2 times sine beta h minus z, which is common in both the integrands, and e to the power j beta z cos theta plus e to the power minus j beta z cos theta within brackets, which is simply 2 cos beta z cos theta, and 2 comes out. Yeah, this is how the two integrals have been finally simplified. The total of them has been simplified. Go through this derivation carefully if you are not convinced. Okay, we are almost out of time, so I'll just give you something and I'll revert back to this later in the next lecture. At this point, now it's easy enough to integrate the result. Sine A cos B is sine A plus B plus sine A minus B divided by 2. So this integrand now can be broken up again into two parts. God damn the antennas. But integral of sine something is easy enough. So I've done that here, and then I have substituted the upper limit and lower limit. Lot of simplifications are necessary here. Integral 1 plus integral 2 turns out to be finally given by this formula. I'll go through it again in the next lecture.